Hey everyone, it's Brad Taylor again. It's been a while since my last video on the Epic Fury Iran conflict. A lot of times passed since then. I did a video once earlier about what I thought would happen, and it looks like I had 4 options. We've ended up with option number 3, and we're trying to get to option number 2, where Iran allows us in to do inspections on a nuclear program. They give us their uranium, that kind of stuff. And there's been a lot of discussion about nuclear weapons, about the uranium and things like that. And I thought I'd make a video kind of explaining that, some of the nuances of that, because it's not black and white. So just to give you some of my own thoughts and some anchor points that you can use when you're seeing the news about what they actually mean when they say certain things. Everyone keeps talking about nuclear weapons like they're black and white. You know, if Iran gets it, they're going to use it. They're going to blow up America. They're going to blow up Israel. And then the other side says, you know, it's not that big a deal. If they get a nuclear weapon, you know, look at North Korea. They've had a nuclear weapon for a long time now, and they have not blown us up, so this isn't worth the effort. And I think both those discussions, when you talk about a black and white problem set of nuclear weapons, is missing the forest for the trees. The nuclear weapon's true power is not necessarily in its use, but the threat of its use. Not literally in blowing things up, but the fact that you can blow things up. Iran wants the missile precisely to protect its regime and to protect all of its activities. They don't want it to willy-nilly launch it. I don't believe they're going to get a nuclear weapon and immediately release it on Israel or immediately release it on the United States. They want it for other activities. And right now, like before we started Epic Fury, Iran uses proxy forces because they want plausible deniability. They get the Houthis to launch rockets at ships. They get Hezbollah to attack Israel. And then, you know, they say, hey, that's not us. We didn't do that. You got to talk to them. You know, those aren't my drones. I didn't fire those things. And they know they can do that up until a point where we get aggravated enough to respond. In other words, there's a red line there that they know they can't reach. They can do enough activities, plausibly deniability, whereupon we won't do anything. Eventually, they'll get to a point where we will do something, which is pretty much what happened with Epic Fury. The problem with this is not whether they'll use a nuclear weapon or not. It's that this red line increases exponentially out for our response against them, and it shortens dramatically their response for using force. If they have a nuclear weapon, they can overtly direct the so-called axis of resistance to conduct attacks all over the place. And they know we won't attack them precisely because they have a nuclear weapon. And they'd be correct. I mean, right now we're talking about regime change. We're fiddling around with it. It's not an overt policy, but basically we've said, you know, we're going to get rid of this regime. We're going to get rid of the regime. And then regime change, it's on the table. In fact, it's the ultimate lever we have right now for Iranian malfeasance. You keep this up, we're going to get rid of your regime. We're going to blow you up. We're going to do whatever. If they get a nuclear weapon, that is off the table. There's no way we would try to conduct regime change if Iran had a nuclear weapon. Precisely because if they're on their death throes and they're all going to die anyway, the last thing you want is them on the way out the door pushing the red button. Because of that, once they have the nuclear weapon, they know that their regime is safe, which is precisely why they want it. And that umbrella would allow them to do nefarious things all over the world without us being able to effectively tell them, you know, we're going to get rid of you, because they know they have the ability to prevent us from doing that. North Korea is a good example. They've got upwards of 10 nuclear weapons right now. They actually have an intercontinental ballistic missile in reach of the United States. And there's literally no way on earth we would ever consider doing an Epic Fury against North Korea. We just, out of the blue, would not go over there and start blowing them up saying, you're going to give us your nuclear weapons. And the reason we wouldn't do it is because they have a nuclear weapon. Iran sees that and knows very well that if they had a nuclear weapon right now, we would not have done Epic Fury. That is why they want the nuclear weapon, and it's precisely why we don't want them to have it. If we were going to attack North Korea right now, there'd have to be something incredibly bad, a very, very, very high bar for us to risk an attack against North Korea, us attacking them straight, you know, out of the blue, not them, you know, invading South Korea or something, but us attacking them out of the blue would have to be something incredibly heinous they did precisely because they have nuclear weapons. I mean, you can see this on the world stage in other places. This is precisely the argument that Elon Musk made and others have made about providing support to Ukraine for the Russia's invasion. They said if we help Ukraine, it's going to lead to nuclear war. You know, we can't do this. You're leading us to World War III. If you help Ukraine because Russia invaded them, you're going to lead to World War III. Well, why is that? I mean, does he mean that we're going to launch missiles into Russia? That's the kind of help? No, he doesn't mean that. He means that if we help them, Russia will launch nuclear weapons and we'll end up in World War III. In effect, precisely because Russia owns nuclear weapons, it's allowed them a greater leeway to attack Ukraine. Because they have the nuclear weapons, they're allowed to go into Ukraine, and a bunch of people in the United States say we should not help Ukraine because of the nuclear threat. And that's exactly how Iran wants us to act against them. That's why they want a nuclear weapon, and it's why we shouldn't let them have one. As a side note on Ukraine, as Iran's taking center stage right now, we're all talking about Iran, and you might have missed this, but Ukraine is no longer the pure underdog in that fight. This year, for the first time ever, Ukraine has recovered more territory than it's lost. And either last month or the month before, more missiles and drones coming from Ukraine hit inside Russia, not inside Ukraine, but inside Russia, Moscow, other places, than Russia launched into Ukraine. And as far as the nuclear weapons go, yeah, I mean, you can bet your ass if Ukraine used to have nuclear weapons. And in 1994, we got them, along with Russia, to give up their nuclear weapons to Russia. And Russia swore that they would have their sovereignty. Ukraine believed them. Russia got the weapons. Now Russia's invaded. You can bet your ass if Ukraine had kept those weapons, precisely for the reasons we're talking about, Russia would not have invaded them. That nuclear parity lesson is going to have an impact in the Middle East. It's just exactly what I just said. By that, it's going to cause others, people in the region, to question their own defense. Right now, UAE, in the fight, in epic fury, UAE is taking more punishment than Israel itself, more than Saudi Arabia, more than anybody. UAE has taken the punishment. If Iran gets a nuke, you can bet your ass UAE is going to say, we need our own nuclear weapon. Saudi Arabia is not going to be far behind saying, hey, Iran's got a nuclear weapon, I need my own nuclear weapon. Saudi Arabia gets a nuclear weapon. Qatar, which has been on the receiving end of Saudi Arabia coercive diplomacy in the past, is going to say, well, that's not untenable. I have got to have a nuclear weapon too. And all those guys building nuclear weapons is not a recipe for a peaceful world. Having nuclear weapons all over the Middle East is not something that we want. And that's just another reason why Iran getting a nuclear weapon would be a bad thing. In the end, it's not the black and white use of nuclear weapons we should fear from Iran, although that's obviously significant. It's the activities that it shields that it'll engender. It's precisely because Iran is a malign actor on the world stage that we don't want them to have the weapon. Not so much because they'll immediately use it, but because what that will protect and allow them to do if they do have it. So Iran getting a nuke is bad all the way around. But, what do we mean we say Iran's got a nuke? It's not as clear-cut as the press is making out. Trump said he initiated Epic Fury because they were 2 weeks away from a bomb. But that's a little bit of hyperbole. There are three different components to Iran having a nuke that could affect the United States. And it's going to take a hell of a lot longer than 2 weeks for them to get there. We're talking decades, really. Okay, the first thing they have to have is what everybody's talking about. They have to have enriched uranium enough to weapons grade to make a bomb. This is where everyone hangs their hat. They've got 900 pounds of uranium right now that's close to weapons grade. And it would take about 2 weeks of centrifuge work to get that uranium into an ability to make a nuclear bomb. And they can make about 10 of them with the uranium they have. That's why people say they're 2 weeks away. But the enriched uranium is not a nuclear bomb. It is enriched uranium. It's kind of like I said, if I pump crude oil out of the ground, and I'm refining it into gasoline, and I'm 2 weeks away from having jet fuel and gasoline. Well, once I get the jet fuel and gasoline, I still have to make a car and an airplane to put it in. So weapons-grade uranium is bad, but it still requires the components to make a bomb. So that's the next thing they have to do. They got to perfect a nuclear bomb. It's true they could build a crude nuclear weapon fairly rapidly. They could, along the lines of our original Fat Man Little Boy, the bombs we used in World War II, big, giant bombs, they could make one of those fairly quickly. But they don't have the aircraft that could carry it to a target. They have no means of delivery. I mean, I guess they could load it on a flatbed truck and drive it to a target, but all in all, it's not that great of a threat. They've got a giant nuclear weapon in their country that they can't put anywhere. So the first thing they've got to do is refine that technology down until they can make a nuclear weapon that fits on a missile. And they don't have that, and that takes a while to get. I mean, you got to put it on the missile, it's got to survive the flight of the missile, it's got to detonate when it's supposed to, the missile's got to have the guidance to go where it's supposed to go. Those are all technological achievements that they haven't achieved yet for nuclear capability. And, we're talking, probably years for them to get that, not 2 weeks. Now, once they have that, they could threaten Israel and Europe with the technology they have right now. But they do not have an intercontinental ballistic missile. There's no way on earth they could threaten the continental United States with a bomb. So anybody saying if they get the bomb, they're going to blow up America, it's not like they can put it in underwear and run over here. They've got to get it to us, and they don't have the capability to do that. They've got to, one, create an intercontinental ballistic missile, which they don't have. Two, they've got to create a weapon system that'll survive going into space and coming back down and detonate on target, which they don't have that either. North Korea is instructive here. It took them, they said they're going to create a ballistic missile. From the moment they said they were going to create an intercontinental ballistic missile, it took them 52 years to get one that actually worked. More importantly for this discussion, from the time they did their initial test of an intercontinental ballistic missile that failed, it took them 2 decades to actually get an intercontinental ballistic missile that could reach the United States. So that's about 20 years. Given that Iran has already done some research, already has some long-range missile capability, there's a distinct difference between going intercontinental up in space and all that, but they do have some of the technology. And we have AI and other things that increase the pace of how quickly they can do that stuff. And also, though, they haven't actually created or tested anything on that kind of scale. I'd say we'd split the difference and say from a standing start, it'd take at least a decade for them to create an intercontinental ballistic missile that would hold a nuclear weapon that would explode. That's obviously dangerous, but it's not 2 weeks away. And, if we're being all America first here, even if we could Epic Fury today with nothing to show for it and let Iran do whatever the hell it wanted to, we wouldn't have a threat for some time. I'm not saying that's a good idea. Just that threat to the homeland isn't right around the corner. It's most certainly not 2 weeks away. I obviously think Iran having a nuclear weapon would be an incredibly bad thing. The third thing they've got to do, once they have the intercontinental ballistic missile and they've got the bomb that'll work on it, they've got to hide that thing. This is one thing that people don't seem to talk about. Once they've created the ICBM, they've got to protect it. Having a missile and being able to use it are two different things. If we know where the missile launch site is, we can take it out prior to its use. We protect our own capability because of that. We have silos in the United States, but we also have, it's called the nuclear triad. We've got B-52s that have nuclear capability. We have submarines that are patrolling with nuclear bombs all the time. The theory being, if you launch on us to knock our silos out, our planes will be in the air and our subs are already in the water. We can do a retaliation against you regardless of what you do against our homeland. That's the heart of mutually assured destruction. Iran doesn't have any of that. They don't have subs, they don't have planes, they don't have anything. They're going to have to launch it from their terrain. And they have to hide their ability of doing that launch from us before it'll hit anything. Now they could do mobile launchers. North Korea has mobile launchers, China has mobile launchers, Russia has mobile launchers. But that's another layer of complexity. They've got to build mobile launchers that'll hold this missile, and then they still got to drive it around, prepare it for launch, and things like that. I'm not saying that's a panacea and don't worry about them getting a missile. I'm just saying it's another layer of complexity that they have to do. If we're talking 200 missiles, that's one thing. It would be very hard to find 200 missiles running around. But if they make 1 or 2 missiles, 1 or 2, we're probably going to know where those things are at all moments of time. They can put it in a cave and we can't get to it. Fine, we know where the cave is. As soon as it comes out of the cave, boom, we hit it. Anyway, I'm not saying it's panacea, but that is the third thing that Iran has to do to be a credible threat to everybody. Okay, so Iran getting a nuke is definitely a bad thing, but it's not going to happen next month. So what's the state of play for preventing that thing from happening forever? Honestly, in my opinion, closing a nuclear deal with Iran is almost impossible at this stage right now. We're very, very far apart for a couple of reasons. First, and it's political reasons, because Trump withdrew from the JCPOA, the original nuclear deal we had, any new deal, for political reasons, has got to be much harsher. I'll tell you up front, I was never a fan of the JCPOA because it did nothing to address Iran's growing ballistic missile threat. It did nothing to address their proxies. If we gave them sanctions relief, all that did was funnel them money to use with the proxies to attack Israel and other people around the world, attack Americans. They could use that money for ballistic missile research, so I wasn't a big fan of it. Having said that, it did constrain Iran's nuclear program. They gave up all of their highly enriched uranium as part of the deal, the weapons-grade uranium, and they had inspectors on the ground for a number of years. And if that's what Trump's administration is trying to do now, which is what it sounds like, any new deal has to be exponentially better than the old one. There's just no way that Trump's going to say, hey, I tore up the old deal, and because of that, Iran went wild enriching uranium, and because of that, it forced me to conduct Epic Fury, which cost us billions of dollars and 19 American lives. But don't worry, we have a new deal. It's just like the old deal. He's not going to say that. He has to have something that's much greater than the old deal to make all of this worthwhile. But, I mean, just historically, it took 2 years of negotiations between 7 different countries to get to the JCPOA. Getting a better deal in the short term is a bit of wishful thinking in my mind. One other thing we need to talk about too is everybody keeps talking about this highly enriched uranium, and that's how close they are to a bomb. They also have upwards of 12 tons of low enriched uranium. People are talking about Special Operations Forces doing some kind of raid to get this highly enriched uranium. They're completely forgetting about the hardest part about enriching uranium is getting the uranium in the first place. And Iran has plenty of it to enrich. This will have to be dealt with as well. I mean, besides the 900 pounds of highly enriched, they've got 12 tons of other stuff they can enrich. And if we leave it there, we'll be leaving things with the very thing we're trying to prevent. They'll have the ability to highly enrich it, just like they did after we tore up the JCPOA. They enriched uranium, which we're now fighting over. Anyway, all these things together, in my opinion, will make striking a harder deal at this juncture seem like an insurmountable task. And that's just on the American side. Whenever you're in a conflict, you should always red team or, think like the enemy. What is the enemy thinking? What is the enemy going to do? And from Iran's perspective, I think there's little impetus to accede to any deal at this point. In their mind, they did agree to a nuclear deal, which they did. And after 2 years of negotiation, and one administration signed it, the next one turned around, tore it up, and started bombing them. In their mind, why start another deal? That they sign another deal, what's to say the next administration is not going to tear that up and bomb them again? Thus, if they want to go into a deal, they are going to want pretty harsh demands, guarantees of protection that we won't strike them. Something along the lines of a treaty. We're making a treaty with Iran. You don't do nuclear weapons and we won't strike you. Unfortunately, that's something the U.S. literally can't provide at this point. Getting a treaty signed with Iran would be just about impossible. It was impossible before when Obama was doing it, which is why he did the JCPOA. It'll be impossible now. And if we just do a signature deal with this administration, that's not giving Iran the guarantees they want that we won't bomb them when the next administration comes in and they won't sign it. In addition, the first deal didn't involve the cessation of hostilities. It was just a negotiation. Now we've actually attacked Iran and that kind of thing. And they're going to demand the U.S. provide reparations for the damage we did to civilian. And they probably won't say anything about the military stuff, but anything they can claim as civilian, they're going to say, hey, you got to pay for that. Hey, you got to pay for that. And of course, we're not going to pay for anything because that's tantamount to admitting or apologizing for the attack in the first place. It's not going to hold any water with the administration. There are other deals, or there are other reasons that the deal is going to be hard to do, but that's sort of the broad stroke of it. If you're wondering why it's taken so long to get a deal, that's kind of the big picture of this is how it's going to be hard to do. So what do we have in our corner to gain compliance? Not a whole lot in my mind. The only thing that's going to cause the regime to capitulate is a threat to the regime itself. I mean, if we could threaten the regime and say, either do this deal as hard as it is or you cease to exist, that is the one thing that would cause them to do a deal. And it also, conversely, happens to be the one reason they want a nuclear bomb, because that'll never happen to them again if they get a nuclear bomb. Unfortunately, the only way we're going to actually get some kind of coercive threat like that would be the verboten boots-on-the-ground invasion, which we're not going to do. So our hands are a little bit tied here. We got 3 things that I can see that we can use. We can start bombing again, but I've already think we've seen that the air power alone is not going to cause the regime to collapse. They'll just hunker in, say, keep bringing it on, but the enemy gets a vote on this thing. If we do resume air campaign, it's not a one-way street here. That'll cause Iran to resume their attacks, which will inflict a ton of damage on our allies, UAE, Israel, oil flow, everything else. They've already said just recently that they're not going to constrain to just the Middle East. They're liable to start launching missiles into Europe. I don't personally believe they'll do that, but it is a threat. Anyway, if we resume the air campaign, we could end off worse off than we are right now. At the end of the day, they don't capitulate, and now they're blowing up Europe. Number two, we can hold out for an uprising, but the chance of that happening now are much lower than when we started Epic Fury. Just a little, I guess, quick class on that. Whenever you're looking at insurgency or civilian coup or uprising or something like that, both the state and the sub-state actors are competing for a share of the uncommitted in the middle. And just for numbers' sake, I'm not saying this is what Iran has, but just for numbers' sake, say there's 20% that hate the regime and will give their life to get rid of that regime. There's also 20% that loves the regime and will sacrifice their life to protect the regime. There's 60% in the middle, and they're both competing for those guys. They need to get to 60% in the middle. For the regime, what they want the 60% in the middle to do is precisely nothing. Just don't join the fight, and the regime wins. But the sub-state actors, the ones that want to overthrow the government, they've got to get that 60% committed. And that's the ones they want on their side. Unfortunately, one of the barriers to this is what's known as a free rider problem. And that's basically that if I sit here and do nothing, I get the benefits of whatever's happening. In this case, if the overthrow happens of the regime, everybody benefits. So why should I jump in here and help out? You guys go overthrow the regime and I'm not going to do anything. Especially since that if you fail, I've now committed something against the regime and I'm going to the hangman's noose. It's much easier for them to sit aside and say, I'm not doing anything. And it's very hard to get someone to step off the fence on that point and say, I need you to join the cause here and do this. Don't just sit on the sidelines. When the guy on the sideline says, go ahead and do your cause, I'm going to win either way. This lends people even agree with the sub-state who actually hate the regime. They're going to want to remain on the sidelines. One way to overcome that is a perception of success. If the sub-state group can have this perception of success, it's a foregone conclusion they're going to win, if they'll inevitably win the cause, then the 60% will end up siding with them, at least the greatest portion of the 60% to allow them to overthrow the regime. This is literally what happened in Afghanistan in the months prior to our calamitous withdrawal. While we were there, the perception was there's no way the Taliban could win with the official government. When it's Taliban official government fight and the official government is backed by the United States, there's no way the Taliban could win. Once we committed to leaving, then the villagers had a choice. Taliban rolls in and says, you want to side with us because we're staying, or do you want to side with the government, which is backed by the United States? And by the way, they're leaving. Once that started to happen, it was a domino effect, and every village that fell to the Taliban was another reason for the next village to give up, and they won. Like the Taliban, this perception of success is something that the uprising in Iran would need. But there's little that will instill that at this point in the fight. It might have happened very early on, but at this point in the fight, it probably won't. And part of that is our own problem, our own fault. We've overtly called for an uprising. President Trump himself telling people to take control, implying that we'll come to their help if they do. That should have been a pretty good catalyst, but only if the people believe that the United States will actually come to their help. And unfortunately, the United States doesn't have a great history on that front. Now, I'm not making any moral judgments here. I'm just stating the facts. We have a history of leaving when it's convenient, and people of Iran will be aware of that. In 1991, after Desert Storm, we kicked Saddam Hussein out of Kuwait. He was still a thorn in our side. We called for the Shia in Iraq to rise up and overthrow Saddam. They saw what we'd done to Saddam by kicking him out of Kuwait. They thought America was there to help them. They rose up. We didn't do anything, and they were all slaughtered. The whole thing was put down. A bunch of them were killed. Gas was used. All kinds of bad stuff happened. Make no mistake, Iran saw that happen, and they remember it. More recently in Venezuela, for years we denounced the regime, called the people to overthrow the dictatorship, said he was a bad dude, helped the opposition come on, overthrow Maduro, and then we captured Maduro. And far from helping the opposition assume control, we actually spurned them and started conducting business with the vice president, leaving the regime in place. Make no mistake, anyone thinking about America's support in Iran is going to see that and think about it. The opposition leader gave her Nobel Peace Prize to President Trump and got nothing in return. The regime's still in place. So they're probably not counting on a lot of American support over there, and without any American support, they're probably not thinking that any kind of opposition can win, which is going to stifle any opposition from growing. On top of that, you've got the problem of war itself. Before Epic Fury, the opposition had the ability to say The government is all the reasons here. Every pain you feel is because of the government. We should get rid of the government. Now, with the bombing has started, and the government counters with the United States is all the cause of your pain. You know, stand with Iran. It's not my fault. The United States is the one that's causing these problems. Stand with them. And, you know, the rallied around the flag effect is a real thing. And that message will resonate with parts of the population that the opposition needs to co-opt. Once again, I'm not making a moral judgment here. It's just a fact. People get bombed. They tend to rally around the country they are, not the people who are bombing them. So the opposition probably doesn't think they're going to get a lot of help from the United States. And without help from the United States, there's probably not a lot of impetus to overthrow the regime. There are other considerations. The bottom line that I don't think overthrow the regime from the inside is a very good bet right now. If you're doing poly market and wanting to make some money, that's probably a long shot. All right, the final leverage we've got is our own blockade on the Straits of Hormuz. And I think this in and of itself is probably the greatest tool in causing the regime to capitulate. But unfortunately, it is not a quick tool. You can think of it like a siege of a castle. Eventually, the people inside the castle are going to run out of food, but it's not going to happen overnight. In this case, the very last people who will be affected by us blockading the oil and stopping the flow of revenue to them is the regime itself. And they killed between 30,000 and 40,000 people the last time they went out and protested, literally gunned them down in the streets. Make no mistake, letting the population suffer economically is something the regime is fully prepared to do. Now, eventually, if we choke them enough and they get no outside help, which is a very big if, they could be getting outside help too from China or Russia or whoever, North Korea, that'll keep them afloat. But if they didn't get any help and we choked them off, they would eventually be forced to capitulate. But that could take months, if not years, to happen. Once again, North Korea provides a good example. We sanctioned them so hard, there were literally intel reports of them eating bark to survive, but the regime hung on. Now, Iran, for their case, they're betting the opposite. Namely, that we're much more susceptible to the price shocks of Hormuz than they are. And they might be right. As a democracy, the government answers to us. Unlike them, theocracy, they don't care what the people in the streets say. But as a democracy, the government answers to us, and the people demand, you know, far from us eating bark, if the price of gas keeps going up, we may demand to leave, and we'll do it. A side note of this, too, precisely because the price of gas is rising, the Trump administration has relaxed sanctions on Russian oil to ease the pain of that, put more oil in the system to keep the prices as low as he can. And as a result of that, in 30 days, Putin has gained more money than he would have gotten in 6 months of selling oil because it was sanctioned before. And that's given him a lifeline that he'll directly funnel into this fight with Ukraine. And I only bring that up just a reminder that no conflict is in a vacuum. It always has repercussions that happen other places. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say. I hope this helped you think critically about the problem set whenever you see Iran and nuclear weapons, Straits of Hormuz and that kind of stuff on the news. It's much more complex than 2 weeks for a bomb or nukes don't matter, let them get it. And resolving this problem isn't going to happen very quickly, in my opinion. Thank you for watching.